Hello, this is Mike Smith. Welcome back to part 2 of the UV mapping tutorial in Maya. Hopefully you've watched part 1 where I've explained the importance of setting up a project folder. I'll explain again, it's crucial to set your project folder up to make sure your textures actually work. If you don't know how to do that, have a look at my Getting Started tutorial in Maya and it explains everything about project folders and how to actually set subfolders up too. So let's have a look at our UV map for these different objects. Now, all three are the same, but I'm going to show you two different methods of actually how to UV map these. So if I select this first one, you can see in our UV texture editor window, and if you've forgotten, it's in Edit UV's UV texture editor to open that. We can see it looks a bit of a mess. You've got some parts missing from some of our shells, which are the sections of our UV map, and also we don't really know which bit's which. Some parts are obvious but others aren't, and this is just after automatic mapping, which is in Create UVs and Automatic Mapping. So the two options we've got to actually map this properly, we want to end up with what I've got on this right hand model here, where we've got the central part here neatly laid out that's all connected, and we can clearly see these parts on the top right of my texture editor window at the very top and the very bottom of this pillar, and the last parts we've got down here. We can resize them if we need to, but they're clearly separate. So let's just have a look at what we have. Now, the object itself is all one piece. If you're not confident with UV mapping, your other option is to actually split this up into different sections. Now I've got this as 5 different objects, and I could just UV map each one separately. So if I go back up to Create UVs, Automatic Mapping, we've got far less here to work with, and we could just quickly select some of these edges and go to Polygons, Move and Sew UV Edges like we did in the first part of the tutorial. And that's very quick and easy to do when you've got your objects split up like this. So in just a few seconds you actually have a UV map that you can actually use, and then we can just move this over onto our grid here. And it's a good idea to make it as big as you can so you can use all of your resolution. I'll explain about that when we actually get to the texturing part in another tutorial. But that's one option for you. You could split this up into different pieces, but if you don't want to do that, if you want to actually go for it and texture it in UV map it and texture it in one piece, then I'll show you what we can do. So let's first delete these objects here. We don't need those. And let's move this in the middle here. So you can see everything's laid out. There's nothing overlapping, or nothing obviously overlapping. There might be something overlapping, but we want to split this up, and we can split UVs without splitting the object. So if I zoom in to the bottom of my object, I could go onto edge mode, and I'm going to double click on this edge to select all the way around, and you can see lots of different edges selected in our texture editor window. And I'm going to hold shift and double click on some other ones as well. So if I split this one here as well, we've got some separate pieces. And before I split, I'll just select the other ones on the top. So hold shift, double click on these edges as well, and we double click to select all the way around. And now in my texture editor window, I can go to Polygons and split UVs. And it will look exactly the same for now until we actually do something with it. So I'm just going to make this window a bit bigger so we can actually use this. Now what I need to do is select just one UV on one part. So if I just highlight one of these, so make sure you're in your UV mode and just select one UV. Now we can go up to select in our texture editor window and select shell, and that will select the entire shell there. We can now move that up to just one corner out of the way, and it's still got some parts missing, but what we can do now is select the edge, polygons, move and sew UV edges like before. Don't worry if it's brought too much, we can fix that in just a moment. Select another edge, move and sew UV edges again. Now we can actually detach some of these components. So if I select these two edges at the bottom and these two edges at the side here, I can split those like we did before. So polygons, split UVs, and now select one of the UVs on the lower part of this and select the shell, and now we can just move that away. And I'll do the same on the side here. Select just one of those, select shell, and we can move that part away as well. And now if we zoom in a bit closer to this, you'll see some of the UVs don't quite line up. You can see here we've got some overlapping edges, and all we can do there is just go to edge mode. When you select one, it actually selects both because it knows those two want to be attached. Polygons, move and sew UV edges, and we can just work our way around, but it's important we do that because our texture can become distorted or stretched if we don't. So move and sew UV edges there again, and let's have a look at the top. The one on the left is okay, the one on the right needs to have the same thing done, and that's now done there. So we can move that out of the way, and what I'm going to do is move it right off of this grid here. I'll come back to that later on. I just wanted to move it out of the way so we've got some more space. And now we can do the same with this other one on here. You can see it's got the same bits missing, so we could go back onto edge mode, select one of these edges and do exactly the same process. Move and sew UV edges, it brings that across. The same on the bottom here. And now we can detach the components again. So I'll select that edge and also this one below it, and I'm going to do the two at the bottom at the same time. Split UVs, and now select just one of those UVs, go to select shell, and just move it away. The same on the bottom. We may need to actually merge these together later on or sew them together later on, but we just want to move them out of the way until we get the rest of our map organized. So select the shell and just move that out of the way. And like we did before, you can see that some of these edges need to be sewn together. So I'll do that again. Go to edge mode, select those, move and sew UV edges, and then we can move this entire shell just out of the way until we work on the rest of our UV map. So now select all of those UVs and just move that up and out of the way. So let's have a look at our object now. Now these parts here, this part is actually this is the top of our object, and I wanted this split, so I've got the very bottom of it here where it joins onto our cylinder, this slightly diagonal edge, and I want these vertical bits as well. So I'll actually need to merge some of these together, and what we could do is select all of the edges around this, and then we can move and sew the UV edges at the same time. So polygons, move and sew UV edges, they all move up, and the same on this other one. Hold shift, select all of those, polygons, move and sew UV edges. So that's all done. Now we can have a look at the rest of our UV map. So let's have a look at the very top of our object. Now if we look at this, I've actually deleted the very top and the bottom off of the pillar because I'm not going to see it in the scene I'll be putting that in. So it makes it easier to map and easier to texture. So I just want these 8 faces going around here and these 8 sections here as well, all sewn together. And if we have a look in our map, we can see most of that is already done for us. We've got this section here, and it looks like all the other pieces are already separate, so we don't have to split any UVs there. All we need to do is actually select some of these edges, and then we can sew them together. But first I'm going to move some of this away. So I'm going to select all of these UVs, and I'm going to move this just up and out of the way so nothing overlaps later on. And before I select all the edges, I'm just going to try it on 2 of them to see if it's actually working the way I want it to. So select just 2 edges, polygons, move and sew UV edges, and that's working well for us there. So we can now go ahead and select the other ones, and we can do it all in one go because these are all separate pieces down here. We know it's just 2 of those for every 2 here that are going to be sewn together. Polygons, move and sew UV edges. If it doesn't work out for you, just press Z to undo that and then tackle it a different way. You might need to actually split some of these UVs up and then sew them together later on if you find it difficult to work out which one's which. And now we can move that out of the way. So like I did before, select all the UVs, move that up and out of the way, and now we can do the same with this bottom part. So although the object's almost identical, I'm still going to select just 2 edges first of all to make sure it's actually working the way I want it to. Polygons, move and sew UV edges. That's working perfectly, so I'll go ahead and select all the other edges. Polygons, move and sew UV edges again. Excellent. We can select all those UVs now. And again, I'm just going to move that up and out of the way. We'll come back to that later on. Now this part should be quite simple. So if we have a look at our object, we have 8 faces going around that, and we've got 4 sets of 2 here. It should be quite simple. We can just select one of the edges first of all and actually see which ones join there. So we can see this end one is here. So before I do that, because that might bring these 2 over and actually overlap with these, I'm going to try selecting another one. It still might overlap, so what I'm going to do is move all of those UVs out of the way. Sometimes when they overlap it becomes quite tricky to work out which part's which, so I'm just going to move that up. At least it's up there. This part might overlap, but at least I can see what's actually going on. So I'll select another edge and now move and sew UV edges. Okay, so that's moved it up there. Let's try another edge. Move and sew UV edges again. And then the last one is this one just here. So polygons, move and sew UV edges one last time. So if we now look at our object, what we need to do is make sure these faces are pretty much in the same proportion as this here, and that looks quite accurate. So I could now select all of those, and we can actually position that on our grid here. So rather than selecting the edges, I'll select the UVs, otherwise it will select other edges on here that actually join. So select all the UVs, and we can move that just down here. I'll put it at the top actually. We can resize it later on if we need to. And let's move these parts as well. What I might need to do is scale those. So I'm going to scale them together, hold shift and select the other one. And I'll scale these two down together so they're both the same size. So if I end up using the same texture later on, I can just duplicate the layer in Photoshop and it's already the same size. So I go to your scale tool, scale those down just a bit, and now we can position those. And I'll put these down the very bottom here. What you'll need to do is make a mental note of which one's which. So I know the one on the left here is the one on the top, and the one to the right of it will be the one at the bottom. Or you could position them one on top of the other if you want to, if that helps. It's really up to you. And now we can move these ones as well. So if I just select one part, let's see which one this actually is. So that's the bottom. So I'm going to position these on the right hand side of my texture editor window, and I'm going to put this one right down at the bottom. And the last one will just go above that. And now we can actually scale up this final object. You really want to use the most amount of space in your UV texture editor window because you only get a set resolution in Maya. If you just texture on a tiny piece, you're not really going to be getting that much out of your resolution, so scale this up. And now we can just position that. Hopefully that fits. That's a bit too big, so let's scale that down a bit more. Okay, and that should be quite straightforward now to texture. So keep an eye out for my future tutorials, which will be about how to actually texture this in Photoshop. And I'll be going through different tools in Photoshop, so if you haven't used it before, don't worry, I'll go through all of that. Okay, so keep practicing this. It really is the longest process in texturing, so if you manage this well, the rest of it is even easier. Okay, so keep learning something new, keep saving as you go along, and make notes of any adjustments you make.